Then there's a scene change. The scribes walk away or slink off, and the disciples drift away, and Jesus, probably a little tired from all of the excitement, slumps down against the wall next to the treasury, possibly to rest, clearly to watch. Scholars believe Jesus was sitting between the court of the Gentiles and the court of the women. They were separated by some beautiful gates. There are 13 chests that have various titles, and these chests were shaped like trumpets, and you could put your money into them. 7 of them bore labels like the new shekels, that's what you put in this year. Old shekels, that's what you owed from last year. Pigeons and turtles, burnt offerings, the wood, frankincense, gold for the propitiation, and then 6 of them had written on them, voluntary sacrifice. So there are 13 of these, and people would announce their gift, and then they would throw. They would toss their money into the receptacles, and the big money, the heavy money, would clank and make quite a noise. If the coins were few or light in weight, couldn't hear them. It made no sound at all. You could tell how much somebody was giving by the sound that it made as it swirled around the container and fell into the treasury. Many people put in large sums. The verb is to cast, to throw, to drop. Rich people put in much, meaning much in number. The emphasis is on quantity. Then a poor widow came. And the term poor doesn't accurately describe just how poor she was. She wasn't penurious. She wasn't pinched by her circumstances. She wasn't impoverished. She was, as we would say in Mississippi, po. The word means to crouch or cower like a beggar. She was bent over, deeply destitute, lacking in earthly resources, helpless as a beggar. The idea here is she wasn't a peasant, she was a pauper, the extreme opposite of the scribes. She bent over literally and figuratively because she was so broke. Mark says she came and threw in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Our English translation doesn't really do justice to this. The Greek Bible says she cast in 2 lepta. A lepton literally means a thin one. It comes from the word peel, like you peel a fish. The scale of a fish is so thin, a lepton. Mark tells us that 2 lepton equal a quadrantes, or a quadron. And think of it this way, if you had 128 quadrons, you could buy some grapes, a little cluster of grapes, or a haircut. This woman had 1 quadron. So with 2 lepta, she couldn't even buy a haircut. She had 2 quarter pennies, worth about half a cent. The point is, measured in quantity, she had virtually nothing to offer. You ever feel like that? I'm so poor that my little gift won't even move the needle. This story says that's not the way to think about it. Her little coins weighed so little you could barely hear them when they went through the system into the treasury. And Jesus was sitting there watching all this. And he called his disciples over and he said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has thrown in more than all the others who are contributing to the treasury." And as I read this, Jesus is saying, I think, that her tiny gift outweighed all the others combined. It's not the size of the coin, it's the size of the heart that gives. Here's what we need to see. Because they contributed out of their abundance, out of their abounding, out of their surplus, out of their leftovers, but she gave out of her poverty, her depletion, her abject poverty. Jesus said she put in all, as much as she had, her whole, her entire, her complete bios. She threw in her entire biography, her entire earthly life. She held nothing back. And Jesus says God values that gift highly because it cost her so much and because she held back nothing. Now let's think carefully about what Jesus is telling us. In the business world, a $10,000 gift is worth a lot more than a half-penny gift. And Jesus says, not necessarily, not always. My grandmother, Tucky, we call her Grandma Tucky, she was a little English woman, about 4'10", deaf as a post. It's a great storyteller. She used to have a lot of little sayings and poems, and she said, "The silver dollar to the penny, I'm bigger and stronger and shinier than thee." And said the penny to the dollar, "Yes, 'tis true, but I go to church more often than you." I loved hearing how that little penny stood up to that silver dollar. Jesus says, in this case, with this particular woman, her half penny was worth more than all the other gifts combined. Why? Because these rich folks were contributing, they were helping out, they were contributing, but she was all in. They gave out of abundance, she gave out of destitution. They wouldn't miss it. She put in everything she had. Now, is Jesus criticizing abundance? I don't think so. The distinction he's drawing is not based on quantity, but on quality. Jesus is focusing on trust. Where do we place our trust? That's really the issue here. The rich folks can afford to give. She couldn't afford to give, but she gave anyway because she trusted God. Now, in all honesty, and this has come up a few times in my ministry, I might have said to her, "Look, lady, keep your money. You need it worse than the church does. Wait till God blesses you with more and then give." But you know, that completely misses the point, doesn't it? And it robs her of the joy of trusting God. Jesus isn't saying, "I want you to put your last dollar in the collection plate." I suppose if you were like the rich young ruler or you were addicted to wealth, he might say that. But I don't think he would say that, "Put your last dollar in." What Jesus is saying is this woman held nothing back. She wasn't self-promoting. She wasn't hedging her bets. You know, she could have put one in and kept one for herself. She was all in, completely depending, trusting on the mercy of God. She was motivated by trust and love. Now, you know, in some ways, I envy this woman. She was free and she was unencumbered. Most of us are trying to be responsible stewards, and rightfully so. We're trying to save up enough to retire on. We need to set aside enough because we know Social Security, if it keeps going the way it's going, is not going to be around in 30 years. We're anxious about money, and especially outliving our money. What I hear God saying to us today is, relax. Martha, Martha, you worry about everything. That's not the way I want you to live. Trust God. Aspire to be like this widow who threw in her whole biography, her entire life. This morning I hear God emphasizing the word trust. I call this sermon, "In God We Trust." And I chose that title because that is the official motto of the United States. That was a fairly recent development. We adopted "In God We Trust" as our motto 59 years ago. In 1956, we were locked into a tough battle with the Soviet Union, which was promoting state atheism. The 84th Congress passed a joint resolution declaring "In God We Trust" to be the national motto of the United States, and President Eisenhower signed that into law on July 30, 1956. All our coins and our paper money contain that statement now. It's been challenged a number of times in court, and it's held up. The question is this: do we? Is it true? Do we really trust God? Or is it simply a motto? Something we write on our money. We can give out of our abundance. We can all do that. Or we can give our whole biography, which is what this poor woman did. And it's what Jesus was asked to do. In a way, she represents him in this story. As he taught in the temple, surely Jesus must have been keenly aware that probably in less than a week's time, what was about to be asked of him. Will I contribute my wisdom, my time, my ability to preach and heal, or will I throw it all in? Will I throw myself on the mercy of God? Will I entrust my whole biography to the cross and to God's plan of salvation? We know what Jesus did. We know what this poor widow did. And we know that their faith pleases God. God isn't after your money. He's after your heart and your soul and your mind and your whole biography. Stewardship is one of the ways that God invites us to practice what we preach. May God grant us the courage to say yes to this means of grace for love's sake. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, let God's people say,